responsible for the current strategy. He's responsible for making a lot of the decisions. But what Congress can do is Congress can demand some change. Congress can demand greater information. One of the things that we say in our 100-day platform, our 100-day recommendations to Congress is we need to start having we need to put together a bipartisan committee, having weekly meetings with the administration to get an assessment of what's going on. We need to step it up with regard to our national intelligence estimates on a range of different issues, so we're making sure that we're getting the kind of information that we need, a declassification of some of that information, or a declassified form of some of that information, so that the public and the rest of Congress is getting the information that it needs. There needs to be greater dialogue between the President and the Congress, more information that's getting to the public, so that we actually know what's happening in Iraq, as opposed to kind of, you know, the nice commercialized version of what we're getting, and that will help put some pressure on the administration and help Congress to make the kinds of decisions and recommendations that it should be making.
Another email from Ann in Chicago. Redeployment, minimum wage, reconsideration of the tax plan, education, civil liberties, and a host of other issues Mr. Bush will not be in favor of. Will put him in a predicament. Knowing that the above issues will put the Congress in direct defiance of Bush policies, will the Democrats go boldly where Democrats have feared to tread in the past 6 years?
Well, the question as to whether or not the President will be willing to come along is up to the President. They'll be making that decision at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. But again, I would say the election should have sent a strong message to the President that the American people want some sort of change. I do think that it's important for the Democrats, for the majorities that control the House and the Senate, to go forward boldly. This is a moment where we, as another caller said, we've got serious problems. Serious problems need serious solutions and need bold leadership.
Next call for Melody Barnes comes to us from Mobile, Alabama, Republican line. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, CSPAN. I originally called to talk about the implementation of the 9/11 Commission report that about 100 hours was going to be used by Democrats to do it, but in listening to your host, the Michigan Law School graduate, I guess you said?
Yes.
And she mentioned that the voters had this time voted for change, reminded me that I don't know, what she represents, the Center for American Progress means all of the Americans, because in the Michigan Law School, if you're a white, apparently you're not welcome. And the voters in Michigan apparently overwhelmingly voted to eliminate race-based discrimination against whites. I hope they implemented over there the change that the voters voted for. But your guest talks about the energy independence, and she used the buzzword. We can't drill our way out of the problem. But the friends of the, or you could call the enemies of the America, who have proclaimed that they're enemy. They don't just hide it. Mr. Chavez, Mr. Castro, they're busy drilling on the intercontinental shelf of the Gulf Coast of America with impunity. And the only people who are not allowed to drill in the Gulf Coast on the continental shelf, where there's tons and tons and tons of oil, are American companies.
Thank you. Let me take the caller's point in your line earlier about you can't drill your way out of it. What specifically should we be doing that we're not? Car companies already are developing hybrid vehicles that are seen around the country, and we are becoming more energy independent. Jimmy Carter talked about that 30 years ago. What needs to be done?
Sure. And again, I go back to our 100-day proposals. One of the things that we say is that we need to get to 25% renewable fuel, 25% of renewable electricity by the year 2025. So that means that we need to invest seriously in research and development, and also in the things that we already know work, to make sure that we can meet those targets. There's already legislation that members of Congress, on some on a bipartisan basis, have put forward to start to address these issues. We can also start to set temperature caps to encourage Congress to think more aggressively about how we're going to deal with the issue of climate change, which automatically ties to the issue of energy independence and renewable fuels, so that we are encouraging the promotion of flex fuel vehicles, that we're proposing, that we are pushing the increase in flex fuel gas pumps. There are a number of things that, in fact, can be done that we're not doing right now. The ideas are there. It's just a matter of taking them up and passing them.
Carl Lanier of Henry, Virginia has this email. What do you think the chances are that any meaningful legislation will be passed in the next 2 years, given the president's veto power and the lack of votes to override the bills?
Well, not every piece of legislation is the same with regard to the ability to override a veto. I mean, I would hope that the president would be willing to work with Congress on a number of different issues, minimum wage being one. I think education being another area where there may be the ability to reach some kind of agreement. Stem cells, I mean, that's an issue that the president, a piece of legislation that the president did veto. Congress has now changed. There may be the ability, if not immediately, but in the very near future, to override a veto. So, again, this goes back to the popularity of these issues with the American people. These issues weren't created out of, and their resolution weren't created out of whole cloth. This is in response to what people have said they want. I hope that the president is willing to listen.
Our guest works for the Center for American Progress. Our next call is Orange, Massachusetts. Democrats line, good morning.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask her about the voting machines without a paper trail. Shouldn't the Congress and the Senate outlaw those machines unless they have a paper trail? Because people are really getting mad at those machines. Look at Florida's 13th district. That's a mess. They should have a law set in Congress that if the machine doesn't have a paper trail, that the states can't buy them.
Thank you.
You know, it's interesting that the caller raised that issue. It's not one in which I have a great deal of expertise. I do remember, however, on Election Day going to vote and getting the choice as to whether or not I wanted to vote with a machine that would, in fact, have paper, or whether or not I wanted to vote electronically. So this is certainly an issue that I know a number of organizations are focusing on because of the kinds of concerns that we think about going back, 6 years ago. So I think it's one that people will continue to put a lot of energy behind to try and address.
Our next call is Aurora, Illinois. Good morning.
Good morning, Steve. Good morning, Melody.
Good morning.
Melody, you're an attractive, intelligent woman, so I'm going to ask you a question on policy, which it seems is your forte. We, in the Second World War, actually saved China from being wiped out by the Japanese. They turned against us. We supplied and took care of the Russians so that they were able to defeat the Germans. They turned against us. We give ourselves credit for Japan, that we turned them into the country they are today. The truth of the matter is the emperor. And if it wouldn't have been for the emperor of Japan, the Japanese probably wouldn't have went along as well as they did with our policies and our changes for that country at the time. So my question to you is, what is it about our policies in the world that seem to, anytime we step in to try to help somebody, makes a bigger enemy out of them than it does a friend? I mean, it just seems like if you track history, there's always been something wrong with our policy someplace. I'm not sure whether we're putting too much pressure on people to change to the American way, or that they're not capable of, or exactly what it is about our policy that just seems like we go in like a bolt in a glass house and crash all the windows.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the caller for the compliment. I appreciate that. I think that, well, there are several different things going on here. I mean, with regard to China, the Center for American Progress actually has engaged a China task force to look at the plethora of issues that are important for us to address with regard to China, and not just to see China as an enemy. It's a huge, huge economy. There are energy issues there, there are trade deficit issues there, there are human rights issues there, and we have to take those on in a thoughtful manner and not just see China as the enemy. The same with regard to other countries in that region, and in fact, if we don't engage those countries appropriately, it puts us at a disadvantage in dealing with very serious problems like